This is Antithesis, your underground academic radio where the focus is on you. For those that are in the thick of it today, we know what you are living through. And for those that chose or were forced onto a different path, we know what it costs. We're here to be your companion and to help you reorient your compass a bit, to help make sense of it all. Thanks for being here. The opinions expressed here are my own and do not reflect those of my employer or any entity professionally affiliated with me. Topics in these podcasts will be familiar to many, if not all, within the academic and scientific communities, within institutions, industries, and employers of all kinds. Some of these topics may be of a highly sensitive nature to certain listeners, particularly those that have experienced or are experiencing them, and could trigger some emotions that are upsetting or distressing. I've created this space to speak openly about these topics with the broader goal of helping individuals cope, adjust, and adapt constructively to the many challenges at hand. With that said, thank you for joining me. Antithesis, Episode 5, Trust. Hello, everybody. Welcome to today's episode. Today, I want to discuss a topic, a theme, an action that permeates all of our lives, no matter who you are or where you're from, and this is trust. Even from the moment we are born, trust no less than dictates our lives, completely at first, since as infants, there's not much room for independence and choices, obviously, and then it can impact us to varying degrees and levels in our personal and professional lives as we get older and gain more quote-unquote life experience under our belts. Now, when we think of trust, so here, pausing for a moment to reflect on what this word means for you. I think for many, especially if you're younger with fewer miles on your chassis, this word expresses something binary. Either you trust something or someone fully or you don't. Even just thinking about this, it's a strange convention because at first pass, it would seem like trust is all or none, essentially a zero-sum concept. But rather, for each and every relationship, it really does all become probabilistic, though that is difficult to say. And for many of us, hard to believe and maybe even more difficult to accept, even for myself. And what I mean by probabilistic is that our trust may depend on circumstances, maybe only under rare and or difficult scenarios. Levels of trust might waver a bit, or maybe it isn't about circumstances at all. And either you as a person feel you can't trust anyone or anything, or alternatively, someone or a situation is not all that trustworthy. And here we start considering that gray space in between. As I thought more and more about this episode, my thoughts are with you all today, as well as the rest of the citizens of the United States. It hit me that I really never tried to encapsulate in simple ways what trust was, what it has been to me, or even so much what it is to me today. I want to state in some fashion it's straightforward, but I'm betting many of you listening could easily disagree with that sentiment. So, with all things being equal, trust is seriously a complicated thing. And my point that it can be probabilistic and rarely an all or none level, well, it still boils down to the fact that even with how we feel in a situation or scenario, we will end up having to go in one direction, all or none, or the other. We still have to make decisions that end up being black and white, with all the different shades of gray in between. And this is where I want to tie in some reflections for those of you in any employment or workplace, maybe even your relationships, but especially for my audience members that are under the guidance of advisors and mentors in academia, whether junior scientists aiming for their research degrees, senior scientists hoping to move higher, or young faculty aiming to earn tenure. This episode is going to revolve around some personal anecdotes and particularly the dynamic interplay of one's own interpretations and feelings between trust, rules, those that are written and quote unquote unwritten. The latter I ended up discovering more as I climbed the academic ladder. Definitions, their interpretations, and naivete. That last word, naivete. You just don't know until it hits you, and sometimes the costs and challenges that it brings. But with it, and I'm the first in line to confess, when you have hopes to be a part of something bigger and better, when you want to believe you can give something more, even share with others improvements and gains and victories, the purity of that faith in yourself and what you aim to do and achieve. Admittedly, there are fine lines between faith and naivete and the more caustic word ignorance, for sure. But I'll set a critical tone here to provide context for anyone that finds it challenging to relate or might feel some of the forthcoming examples sound in any way outlandish. It's just like everything else in life. You had to have been there, right? The idea of everyone, of us being different people in multitude ways, but also the rule I set for myself long, long ago and try to remind myself, even in these wildest of times today, try for a moment to imagine wearing those shoes. And I hope every one of us can take back some power, some control over ourselves, and to not let the direst of situations define us, but to make the most constructive, productive, and healthiest choices for ourselves, no matter how close or far that might shift that vision quest of yours or that dream for yourself. My father was terminal with cancer many years ago, and I was off at school. I was an undergrad at the time, so I returned back to the university, and he told my sister this quote: "Don't lean on anyone else until you can stand on your own 2 feet." And quite fitting for the time. And we lost him just a few months later after that. And I think it's a really important expression, but only after you gain more life experience and you start to really reflect on families and friends and jobs and all the trials and tribulations we go through as to what that actually means, and specifically the challenges of how you not lose yourself in any situation, whether it's a long loving marriage of 50, 60, 70 years, or maybe an employer that you've been with for so long, or the opposite, short relationships or short employment periods, right? But how you can stand on your own feet and not lose yourself, but also still hope for the trust and aim for having the trust and also the trust of others. So gaining the trust of a boss or a mentor and having students or employees trust you if you're their superior. It is not unreasonable for any human being to desire and expect fairness to a measurable degree, particularly in a system or institution driven by policies and procedures. And this doesn't mean we can't trust, but it doesn't take more than a few minutes on social media to see meme after meme after meme of employees, seemingly with every employer having a field day for much of the same content of lackluster working conditions, subpar leadership, and so on and so on. So again, it's not that we can't trust, but it does mean in every situation and scenario, we need to be our own people and to continue to calibrate our own goals, our own value system, our own worth, so we can sustain. The power dynamic of the workplace, and particularly academia, can shift to the point of damaging, particularly when we want to please at any cost, possibly bending to or even beyond the level of subservience. This can be from graduate student to postdoc advisor, or even pre-tenure faculty to tenure committee, or employer to supervisor in any job. Of course, when the eye of the beholder is that of your advisors or supervisor, now you are left with another entirely different set of behaviors and expectations that you need to interpret, possibly very often, in attempts to find accord with their requirements. When I was a graduate student, I remember having a conversation with my advisor and was just reflecting on what I was as an undergraduate taking classes at a very large research university. And I came from a small school, a school of 100 people, 25 in my class. So tiny rural community. And I remember having been a teaching assistant for a period of time and I was having some success at that. And the conversation ended where I was frustrated because I'd struggled, and even with some of the graduate classes I was taking, just getting started out. And I blurted out to him, look, I've been a B student. I am a B student at this point. I wasn't proud of it. I was just sort of confiding in the fact that, I wish I was an A student, but for some reason I'm still having difficulties, right? Connecting sort of advanced topics and growing in how I learn. And I got a message from our department, some academic advisor, and this was a graduate program again, about me making the statement that I was a B student. It actually came up in a pre-committee meeting or something for my preliminary exam. And I remember going back to my advisor and confronting him. What? What did you tell them? You told them that I admitted I was a B student? Well, that's what you said. I just thought we should report it. I just couldn't believe at that moment. Like, that was a very intimate detail that I was frustrated with. But I obviously had to reattune my own relationship with my advisor at the time and was frustrated, obviously, but I had to grow and understand better of how this person worked. Well, it turns out then it was a lesson of what we will call written versus unwritten rules. So about a year later, I think within that year, I am taking my preliminary exam, and for a lot of preliminary exams and folks out there that have done this in the past, there was a presentation component and then a question component. So we didn't have to do days of written exams, which was great, but we had a presentation to give and then examination kind of questions at a chalk talk. And I am in the midst of answering questions and I'm not recognizing a single thing they're asking. And I'd spent 6, 7 weeks just studying my butt off, all the different areas and things that were topics of relevance. I ended up getting adjourned from my preliminary exam. They did not fail me. And essentially, what I was told at that point was I should have gone to the committee to determine what the questions were. And I was like, where did this come from? And I found out from my advisor in that very moment, well, yes, this is how it works. You're supposed to get the questions from your committee. And I was just exasperated. I couldn't believe it. If this is an unwritten rule of how the preliminary exam works at this institution, in this department, that was just a crazy moment in my life and my academic path. That summer passed, got the questions, came back, gave a great presentation. I passed in the fall, but man, that was so frustrating and should have been a really clear example more and more for later in my career, how to read between the lines, to see the lines, read between the lines, and be able to anticipate what might be around the corner. Naiveté. Expecting something, a role, a job, a title, how things play out, pretty much anything to be defined as it is in a dictionary. And even with the rules that are written, everyone just get the word on the street, talk to friends, find out the people that are in your program, right? I mean, whether you're a new graduate student or a postdoc or faculty, right? These things apply. For many of you in the present or past academic world, the word professor and its dictionary definition might not be how you are most familiar with that role, but simply seeing examples in real life or portrayed in media or in how they operate for better or for worse. So when we start thinking of what professor means, maybe the better definition from those examples could be what you see you could do or even improve upon. But this could also become a potentially dangerous definition and proposition. Why? Well, just like with any boss or even leadership contingent, human institutions or establishments should be the ones to shine brightest, if shine at all. Is that that faculty member, that new young faculty member that's come in and it's going to light the sky on fire with results and great teaching or whatever. These are all parts of that equation that really need to be balanced. When you get yourself in a situation where a mentor, supervisor's boss, anyone who has overarching authority over your future, really take a serious accounting of the dynamic, of the chemistry, of your interaction with these people or the sum of the people overseeing you. I was so naive. My story from graduate school and those struggles and how to address those points in my life, you do what you can to try to overcome these challenges. Despite trying my best to communicate and working to meet standards, both as a graduate student, then even as a faculty member. Here it might boil down to perspective, but this also comes down to how to get things done. So it might not be just a difference in personalities or disagreeing about points, but but how are you doing things? They might your advisors, your mentors might say, well, you need to do it this way. You should do it that way. So it's not about just what you're getting done, but how you're getting them done. And this is where differences in style, not necessarily productivity or ability to get things done, or maybe even win awards or publish papers, this can become a real grinding point. And it's difficult to admit and it's hard to accept, but it really is a fact. And it just makes that pathway that much more challenging for people that want to get into academia, into the professoriate, and try to make an impact as to what they see their dream or their vision. Whether it was how I wrote proposals or papers or built a seminar series, this is where doing things well can start to become a complicating matter. And when attentions can shift to not just criticisms, but excoriations on your shortcomings. Well, you definitely need more papers now. You need to do X, Y, or Z now. Is it a constructive and positive support you're receiving, or is it something else? And I think oftentimes everyone faces these feelings to different degrees. In some instances, they can even be extreme. And, I think today applies to all levels of that, different parts of the spectrum, all grades of the spectrum there. But especially when things are more serious, how you take account for your own wellness and your own health. And you say to yourself, my dream has been this. Do I have the opportunity chase that vision and that dream, or are the variables that are part of this whole equation not fitting for me? If you have a dream, do what you can to live it. But if emotional and psychological barriers are being thrown up in front of you to the point they seem out of bounds of fairness and insurmountable by one or maybe a few in power, then give yourself the one thing everyone should have the right to do: communicate and express yourself and your concerns. But I say this with complete and utter awareness. When it comes to disproportionate power, you being in the stead of folks with ultimate control of your future, essentially being powerless, with the brakes on your progress to your dream, or worse, the knife to the throat of your dream, logic and confidence flies out the window. In those moments, I've felt it. And when amplified, you're pairing it with emotional abuse, some gaslighting, some intimidation. It can make the strongest people crumble and fall into atypical patterns, from withdrawal to self abuse. And we've talked about fear and failure and how these things it's a snake eating its own tail, and it just can amplify and make it worse and worse. As I experienced this as a faculty member, just a lack of consensus and community, and feeling like I had the type of support where it could be constructive and I could make gains, even as things were progressing so well. I found myself feeling displaced, isolated, even somewhat ostracized, and ended up doing all I could, driving on my own. And this led to so many difficulties and challenges. Many I was able to overcome, but some were insurmountable. And one of those was, if you're not welcomed by the tribe, even if you were invited to be a part of that tribe, then you simply have no home. And with no home comes no support, no aid, and no trust. And folks, this is everywhere. This isn't just academia. That's a fact. It is unfortunately as normal as what we could only hope would be the good that exists out there for all of you and others that are driving to make things work. But as so many institutions, academic and otherwise, are driven from the top down, as they've been for so long, it's pervasive. This topic yet again circles back to encompass each of the topics presented in prior episodes. And this one about trust is especially tough because why, if you are good enough, maybe even great enough to achieve your dream, then why should others be allowed to stop you and, to be blunt, prevent you from even helping to make them better? And this is after they've taken you on in the first place. I have little doubt that when some of you saw the word trust as the title of this episode, thanks for tuning in, by the way, that relationships and love were the first things that shot into your mind. And honestly, is there really any difference? Does it make it any easier to heal from broken trust, whether it was a mentor or advisor, between a colleague and you, or a friend, or a husband, wife, or child? For myself, a part of my naivete came from the fact that I believed in the academic mission, the drive to teach and do research and improve the lives and careers of my students, but also to try to have even a small impact for the greater good of the people of the state where I was a professor, and maybe even the country. When it was all said and done, and during the past years of recovery, it was more about the trust my students and confidants put in me to carry forth in the best way I could to fulfill my original vision, my original dream of what it meant to be a professor. For those of you that hear this, whether it's in academia or in your job, or if it's a family situation and you're being treated in a way that is abnormal, abusive, or in any other way atypical and hurtful, that is not normal. And most importantly, it is not right. It really does apply that so much of these topics keep circling back to the idea of courage and the continuing realization for myself that one can continue to pursue that vision or dream as far as we can possibly take it. But at some point, you truly have to say to yourself, enough is enough, particularly if your wellness and health are being put at risk. I want to close by emphasizing how important it is to hold close those that you have truly trusted in the past and those that have trusted you as a part of that checks and balances system to help you evolve, to help you move forward. Maybe in continued pursuit of your vision, your dream as it stands, maybe to shift and find the options and paths that could fit what you need, because therein lies the need for someone like you with your skills, abilities, and talents. The world is a better place because you believe in building. Trust me on this. And with that, thanks so much for joining me today. And I hope you look forward to our next episode that will be released in a week's time. And no matter on which platform you heard today's episode, if you enjoyed it and want to hear more, please subscribe, follow, like, and share. And set your notifications to let you know that next fresh episode is ready for you to dig in. All of you, keep building up your courage, hang in there, and keep your head up. We'll talk to you again soon. Continuing 30 years of experience with stories in and beyond the academic realm, Antithesis is a podcast that will take these perspectives and philosophies and pull them, along with you, the student, the researcher, the innovator, the educator, into the sunlight. Join us for some firsthand experiences, insights from inside and outside academia, and perspectives that are aimed at redefining the conventions of academia and your training, with the aim of helping you reorient your compass and strengthen you on your journey forward, or to recover and grow from those times past. We'd love to have you follow us and tune in weekly. If you have a topic you'd like discussed or a challenge you are facing you want to share, email us at allsystemsgo@gmail.com. That is ALLSYST3MSGO@gmail.com.